Okay. Today is January 21st. It's 10:05. Um, we've got uh, Eva Moritz, Rob Klein, and Brad Hopke from Foth, and we have Brian Hemeseth and Jason Schlickburn from the city. We're going to talk about kind of a status update of the bridge feasibility study that I believe went to council in late September. And just going to get an update on schedule, get an update on what's happened thus far, and kind of go from there. So, Brad, if you want to start us off with what you guys have been working on.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen so you can see what we've got for displays up to this point. We've got three typical sheets, primarily the same cross section for all alignments. As discussed during our scoping phase, we've got the full build. Consideration would be a 4-lane, in essence, a 26 back-to-back with a 16-foot wide median, modified to include the extra foot for most strip on the inside median. So this would accommodate two through lanes in each direction, northbound, southbound, and a single left in a boulevard situation. 10-foot shared use path on one side, and we've got a 5-footer. So if you want that modified to a 4, either way. And then we've essentially got kind of a left and a right scenario. This is for Jordan Creek Parkway. Proposing building the northbound side first because the shared use path is on the east side, north of Grand. So that's why we've proposed building the right side for Jordan Creek Parkway, and then just grading out for the full section so right-of-way impacts can be completed with the initial project without having to go back later, similar to what we've done in the past. Right now, we're proposing 3-to-1s just because a lot of this will go through floodplain, and we're just trying to minimize embankment material and narrow the cross section as much as possible, but still being able to provide flood protection for the areas that the road will go through the floodplains. So that's Jordan Creek, and then 35th and 50th, same exact cross section, just flipped to the other side, because I know 50th has the trail on the west side as we go north of Grand. 35th, we could probably go either way, but I think our ultimate logical terminus is going to be either, is it 42nd or 35th across the bypass. I think both of those bridges across the bypass have either a trail or a sidewalk on the west side. So that's why we were proposing putting the trail on the west side. Again, full build, similar to the previous section, just building the southbound lanes and the trail on the west side. And then this would be a typical bridge section. Proposing twins, twin structures. I don't think any of these crossings are going to be close enough to an intersection to where we may need to start developing left turn lanes on the bridge. So we are minimizing structure square footage by having 2 different bridges, dual structures. Again, providing a 30-foot roadway width, which is 2 driving lanes at 12 foot each and a minimum 3-foot shoulder to barrier rail. And then again, depending on which alignment we're talking about, building a shared use path either on the west or the east, and then a 5-foot sidewalk on the opposing side for future build. Any questions on that? Seem consistent with what we've talked about in the past, I think. So
Yeah,
I
it looks
think
good.
I think what the one thing I'd maybe consider is like the approach, like when you're in an area on either side of the bridge, like in the floodplain areas or whatever. If we're in areas where we're not going to be doing any development, or development isn't something that is even possible, is to squeeze that median and that road closer together, essentially, to minimize that footprint of the of the roadway. So if you follow what I'm saying, if we don't need a left turn lane, I know that that requires some shifting and various things, but if we can minimize that, that would be good. I don't know that we have to get into that deep of a discussion about that, but I just um, want to make that known as, because there's a lot of area on either side of those bridges that we probably aren't going to have be able to develop. Um, so I just want to minimize that footprint as much as possible.
And that's not different than what we've done for Grand Prairie, south of Grand anyway, because we squeeze that median width quite a bit as we went through Martin Marietta's property, so it makes sense.
I know it's a
I
little
was
bit
just,
ticky-tacky on that one too, but maybe show the fences on the outside. If somebody's looking at that, they'd be like, how are we going to maintain safe pedestrian path and stuff like that? Show some fences on the cross section.
yeah, we can certainly do that. Again, there's portions of those of Jordan Creek, well, all three, I guess, that will be crossing railroad right away. So we'll have to contend with that taller bridge
Yeah,
through their right away. So no, I was just gonna work west to east, I guess. Um, unless you want to look at a particular alignment first, but uh, this one, I'm gonna start from the north, and work our way south, but this is the Jordan Creek Parkway at Grand Avenue, tying in at the existing intersection and working with an assumed structure depth of 6 feet, which we're trying to stay conservative on that. We might be able to squeeze that down a little bit with a different beam configuration, depending on, what the substructure layout looks like and what our spans are. But um, we are up at 6% on those approach grades, but it appears that we can tie vertically at Grand Avenue and get over the railroad and provide vertical clearances.
good
Um,
to know. Is this similar to the Grand Prairie Parkway then? What did we have for approach percentages on
um,
those?
I don't think we're up at 6%.
Okay,
I think we've got a few hundred more feet on that bridge between Grand and the railroad, so we had a little more uh, horizontal distance between Grand and the railroad to get up and over. But
if this
um,
allows us to start at Grand Avenue, that's a good thing.
yeah, so it appears that we do have enough room to do that if we want to, go above preferred maximum slopes in Sudas. Um, but I mean, 60th, we went all the way up to 7% coming up that hill. So just for reference. Now, these elevations for these crossings, we're assuming, well, we're utilizing LiDAR information. So um, we have not sent anybody out in the field yet to verify like top of rail or anything. So just keep that in mind that we're, plus or minus as far as top of rail elevations. So
Yeah.
if we get to the point where we want to dial this in vertically a little more, then we can certainly send somebody out and get top of rail shots. But
It looks like on Grand, going over Grand and the railroad with South Grand Prairie Parkway was 4.06 and 5.78 for the crest slopes.
Okay. Okay. We were close to 6 at least on one of the approaches.
yeah. Um, this bridge will be shorter because we don't have, the low flow channel that we had to deal with on Johnson Creek. We do have some rough grading limits. We did run a template through here to kind of get us to indicate some of the impacts for this roadway cross section. So to get up and over, we obviously will have some effects on that existing channel. We have plans for here. This is the new triple that was installed, triple box under Raccoon River. I know there's a triple up here under Grand. I just don't remember what size that was. But I'm assuming it's similar. So those are substantial structures we'll have to deal with.
So on this particular crossing, I don't know that Iowa Interstate Railroad has made any mention of having a future parallel track. I guess kind of like we had to run up at Grand Prairie Parkway, but I guess is that a consideration if they do want to add another track probably to the north? Does that kind of prohibit us from making a connection at Grand?
I think we've been assuming a second track in all
Yeah.
these options.
You have?
Yeah, we've looked at like a 15-foot offset to the north. Yeah, second track. So
Okay, perfect. Worst case scenario then, because
yep.
yeah, at Grand Prairie we had to do that because I think they've got at least preliminary plans to look at it further out west. I just don't know how far east they would go with that parallel track.
So as we head south of Raccoon River Drive, again, we have some ability to kind of dial this in horizontally and vertically. We just extended Jordan Creek alignment. Once we get south of here, we may have some abilities to squeeze this a little east and try to balance the impacts between the wooded areas. But again, we were trying to stay as far east of this stream as possible. Kind of the criteria I gave Rob was, pick this property line and just make sure grading the south embankment doesn't encroach into these trees. So we might be able to squeeze this a little farther. My intent is to get as far downstream as we can and minimize the impacts of this stream. So you can see that we overtake this just before we hit our bridge end. So we may have to go through some iterations similar to what we did on Grand Prairie Parkway. Do we want to lengthen the bridge and take this underneath? Do we propose a structure? Do we realign this to outlet upstream on Raccoon River just to make sure this outlets into the river upstream of our bridge so we can save some structure? So a few things to consider as we cross the bridge, but I think we could move this downstream a little bit and minimize and avoid impacts on the south side of the river.
I could definitely see our Army Corps of Engineers seeing that opening in the trees on the north side of Raccoon River there and saying, hey, why can't we try to hit that a little bit better? So yeah, if there's a way we can shift that alignment a little bit further west, not to get into the stream and some of the trees adjacent to the stream, that may be beneficial.
Yeah, maybe once we're off this overpass, bending that and maybe even crossing the river at a bit of a skew to kind of shoot this gap and get as close to this as possible. And then the profile you see, we were shooting the middle, trying to split these property lines and go right down the middle to provide some minimum, depth lots on either side, because it seemed to align best and minimize property impacts as we came into Moffett Lake Road if we centered this. However, we do have options for some alternatives once we cross the river and bend this either east or west. Again, getting as close to the tree line as possible, but minimizing those impacts again, which is similar to what we did to Grand Prairie Parkway. We kind of sucked it up to that conservation easement as far as we could, and then worked our way out from there from the tree line. So there are some options there. Vertically, you can see we've got quite a bit of relief to deal with. This is a similar situation as what we dealt with crossing Raccoon River farther upstream. It's just this bluff is farther away from the river in this location, so we've got some room to get up and over the hill. But we do have some pretty good cut here. Again, we're at, probably acceptable max for an arterial street on our vertical to get up here. So we've got some substantial fill and some cut up here.
A little bit of cut and a substantial fill. Yeah.
So again, we've got some room to play with this a little bit. We have potential to maybe move this crest a little farther south and pull this in and try to minimize some of that. We really haven't optimized earthwork quite yet. We just wanted to kind of get through this initial review and get your input. So the cyan line is what we're using for the 100-year flood elevation, which is based off of the FIS and the firm maps and stuff that we've downloaded from the FEMA library. We did not request modeling information like HEC-RAS modeling from the library because we were just going to do some high-level hydraulics if needed just to get bridge openings. You can see through this area, the red line here and over here is the floodway. The floodplain itself extends even farther beyond that. Usually when we would go through a flood permit with a DOT, it's preferred to span the floodway, but because of the meanders and stuff, the floodway just kind of connects to itself because the river over here, as you go upstream, bends back to the south quite a bit. So it doesn't seem reasonable to build a bridge that spans the floodway. So a couple of these alternatives that we're showing will definitely require some sort of map revision through the FEMA process. And we've done this recently on a smaller scale, so we'll include some of those costs when we get to that point, because going through that process is pretty expensive. I think, you know, 7-8 grand at least just for the permit, and then you've got some other costs in there, but it just didn't seem feasible to try to span. This is probably half a mile or 3/4 of a mile almost in this location.
I think it was
So
3,800 feet.
yeah, so the bridge length you're showing here is just some really rough hydraulic calcs based off the flows that we got from FEMA. To get a minimum opening, it's comparable to what we built upstream over the river for Grand Prairie Parkway. So hydraulically it works. Vertically, we're maintaining the 3-foot freeboard above the 50, and I think we're just above the 100. It sounds like DNR's removed the 1 foot above the 100 freeboard requirement, apparently. So, but they're adhering to the 3 foot above the 50. So vertically, that's what you're seeing here. We encroach a little bit at the 100. And then as we continue the roadway outside the bridge limits through the floodplain, we're assuming at the gutter line, we're assuming 1 foot above the 100 just to keep the gutters dry in worst case condition. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what you're seeing vertically. And you can see kind of the width of that. We were assuming, what, 120 foot right away, I believe, plus 3-to-1 slopes on both sides. So you're looking at roughly a 200-foot swath through the floodplains.
So ultimately, we'll have to do the hydraulics in order to determine no rise on Raccoon River then, right? Is that what you were kind of getting at?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know Snyder played, they technically did not have a no rise. They did have a little bit of backwater, but they did some more detailed modeling. And then their baseline, when they ran it, their profiles were actually below the published 100-year. And with the slight backwater they created with the bridge, they were still below the published 100-year profile. So
Okay.
technically they were, you know, they're within that threshold. So I think the DNR allowed them some leeway there. So, but yeah, there'd be quite a bit of detailed study, modeling and that we would need to do on this.
Okay.
But regardless, even if we get a no rise, we lengthen size this bridge to get a no rise, you're still likely to need some sort of map revision to bring this floodway, because that floodway will have to get redrawn to be shown going through the bridge, is how that normally works.
Yeah, because we're going to cut off that path out that far
Yeah.
to the south.
Yep, and technically you'd have to remove the roadway itself from the 100-year flood also, so you'd adjust some of these floodplain lines too. So, not impossible, but it will take quite a bit of permitting to get through that process. Um, so many questions on that one. I know we were scoped to also provide an at-grade profile here too. So again, it would minimize some impacts to the creek if we were to assume an at-grade with the railroad. So um, just wanted to make sure we were okay with the horizontal through here, and we'll make some adjustments, and we can provide a second profile at-grade also.
Brian, I guess I'm looking at our ultimate streets map, and it appears as if what we have sketched, and again, there's nothing set in stone there, but I think we've got the eastern of the three alignments. If we were to take the center of the three alignments, it really almost points itself toward yet another water feature on the south side of Army Post there. Sorry, that's Moffett Lake Road. I don't know, any thoughts on one direction or the other, or what's going to help us drive one of the three alignments versus another?
You muted.
You're muted, Brian.
Whoops, sorry about that. I think it's going to come down to, I don't know how much you've really dug into this yet, Eva, but I think we'll want to take into consideration, the environmental side of things, and what is what's the most impactful, and we want to try to steer away from that if at all possible. And I think, I don't know, Brad, it sounded like you were doing a lot of things on this alignment to minimize environmental impacts, but I don't know, have you gotten deep enough into anything yet, Eva, to know what is better than another, or any recommendations?
I haven't. We kind of wanted to get the city's buy-in on the alignments that we were showing before we dug in too much. But when I'm looking at the corridor, I could probably look at all three alignments there and just kind of give some guidance on what may be less impactful.
We kind of wait on that. I don't obviously, if there's something south of Moffett Lake Road that is would cause us to have to either do a pretty severe reverse curve or have a jog in the arterial, that's not something that we want to do. If it's something that's insurmountable, I'm guessing, Jason, you said it was like Moffett Lake itself is in the way, or is it just other?
You can see the impoundment a little bit on their photo.
Oh yeah,
I guess
I do
we
see that.
yeah, we get really close to the southern end of that.
Okay.
And then I think if we keep that alignment, we're headed right towards the center of that large equestrian
Yep.
complex, or what it is down there. So I don't know if we pick an eastern or a western alignment, that might give us an opportunity to skirt around that.
Mm-hmm.
With the challenge being our connection point down there at Veterans is centered east and west, right? South of that equestrian complex. So that's going to really cause us to look at that alignment just a little bit more. I think our study is only going to Moffett Lake Road, but we need to also kind of target a little bit beyond on this one, I think, just to make sure we got a clear path to hit Veterans.
Yeah, I think the current concept would be to target woodland at Veterans. I think is the logical terminus if we would continue south. So
Yes.
probably going around the west side of the equestrian center might be a little easier. If you go east, you've got that large gas main that cuts through their diagonal just west of Moffett Lake too, that would have to be factored into that also.
Okay. I'll turn that on my maps. Excuse me. I hit mute.
Yeah, but as far as this, if you want to select the eastern route, then we could adjust this and maybe shoot this gap and maybe come around a little more skewed to the river to where it lends itself to maybe do a little more of that, I guess, and kind of hug these tree line, but avoid any impacts and just build west from there. So there's potential.
Okay.
You've got little ponds all over the place too.
Mhm.
Okay. Probably a task to look at here over the next month or so before we talk next time.
Yeah.
Ready to move on to the next one?
Okay. This display is a little weird because we were trying to get all the way over here to South 35th. So it depends on how much of this you want to see. If you want to strip out, if you think the logical terminus is just getting to Southeast Army Post, we can clean this display up and kind of get it more rotated north-south, and then we could include this as kind of like a secondary. I know we had talked when we were looking at when it comes time to do some cost estimating, that some of this might be like an add-on, and the base cost would get us here to this intersection at 42nd and Army Post. But for now, we just sheeted up everything so you could get a kind of visualize how we get to South 35th Street from 50th.
I don't mind it. I think it looks good. It's easier to see it all on one exhibit.
Okay. And then we've got some alternatives. Some minor alternatives to this alignment. Obviously, we're trying to get back to this existing 42nd Street alignment after we cross the river. Whether you want to come and just tee this in and use Army Post more as the primary east-west, or do we bend this around and try to meet some minimum horizontals to maintain this as the primary route? And then again, this would be kind of another little alternative, whether you just want to come here and have more of a T intersection, or if you want to bend this around and realign Army Post as a secondary. So those are just kind of a few little secondary alternatives that we can kick around as we do some cost estimating later.
Jason, what do you think if we get connected into 42nd, isn't the rest of that just kind of maybe a discussion for a later date, or did we include that in their scope, or what? I guess.
I think we had kind of included that in our scope. I'd have to go back and read through it, but it was at least get us across the river and make a connection into 42nd. And then ultimately, our plan would be to get over to that southeast 35th Street interchange. What would it take to get there? And we were going to have two separate cost estimates.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that as being the intent, kind of an add-on. And just get here for the primary cost estimating when we get to that point, and then add some costs on after that.
Okay.
So again, heading down and essentially an extension of South 50th, which is here. Again, existing trail on the west side. So we build the west half and then the west bridge. Again, you can see some grading limit impacts. This road is fairly steep to begin with, and very narrow, more of a rural section with open ditches, shallow open ditches. So some of this impact is caused by, meeting design standards vertically, but then also just because of the wider cross section. And again, the grading limits indicate a full build situation with 120-foot right of way. What that looks vertically like, again, going up from Grand, trying to minimize impacts through this cut, and then coming down the hill to again maintain minimum verticals at the railroad tracks here, with again roughly a 6-foot structure depth. So we could minimize by coming down a little steeper and hugging the existing, but then eventually we're still going to have to peel away and provide those minimum verticals at the railroad tracks. And you can see the 100 years way down here. So both 35th and 50th are more grade line controlled, just to get over the tracks rather than being hydraulically sized for the bridge. And then peeling away at that south bend of Commerce as it bends back to the east, getting over the tracks, and then this private drive. And you can see the floodways a little narrower through here. It abuts this steeper grade coming up the hill, and it does extend over to here. But again, we were sizing this more hydraulically to get the 100-year flows through and meet well, again, we're well above any sort of freeboard requirements just because of the tracks. And then trying to touch down as quickly as we could. Again, this would probably require some sort of map revision to adjust the maps and bring the floodway through the bridge opening and back out again. Again, all of these are owned now by the Central Iowa Waterworks, both sides of the road. This one was private.
Yeah, we
Nelson
dealt.
Family Farm.
Yeah, that is private. We dealt with them on the recent sanitary sewer project. So you've also got Walnut Woods Drive kind of teeing into 50th Street on this one as well, right?
Yeah. Some of these connections, side road connections, are going to be a challenge. I think Rob has this. I think, was this center line of that road? No. We showed that somewhere.
Yeah, so that's 42nd Street, basically
here it
where
is.
it's on alignment. Yeah, we have another point that shows where we're actually tying into are gonna propose the future intersection of those two roads.
Okay.
So we may be able to bring this down some, maybe steepening this up, but again, vertically, we may be up in the air to get this realigned. And these grading limits, we haven't done any side road modeling of any kind to try to get a feel for what those impacts are for the side road, but you can imagine that these grading limits are gonna extend out in this area and cut this corner just to make these connections work. Again,
So how about on this view right here? You've got the two houses on the west side of 50th. Can't give you addresses or anything, but yes, those two right there. Do they currently get access off of 50th?
Yes,
Okay.
I think these
Are
two
we-
have drives.
Are we able to maintain that access with the new profile that we're selecting?
It's gonna be tough. I don't know if I think this might be more of a Morton building. I think this is just some type of outbuilding, an accessory structure, so I don't
Yeah, 'cause it
think
looks like
anybody
they've got
uses-
access from the west there from somewhere.
Yeah, so there are some impacts to these parcels as far as access, not to mention their front yards. we will have to figure out how to reconnect Commerce Drive back to 50th. We haven't sorted through all those details yet. Because I think just cutting it off and not making some sort of connection is going to turn Commerce into a very long cul-de-sac, which I'm not sure what city max is, but I'm pretty sure quarter mile is probably too long.
Yeah.
For most communities for emergency response. So again, this is real high level conceptual just to get this road over the tracks in the river. Quite a bit more thought needs to go back into how we make these connections and also do our best to minimize impact to private property.
Yeah, and if we're talking retaining walls or something that need to be entertained as part of the profile in order to get that access maintained, I guess look at that as well. We don't need to go into any super detail on what the retaining walls look like, but more just, hey, it's an option. We'll have to throw in a cost for that.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like you can see that driveway connects over to Grand.
Yeah.
Around the pond there.
So this.
So that guy has access. The guy north of him, I don't think has anything but the street there that we're lowering quite a bit.
Okay.
I think we're at a 30 degree skew, which is doable.
Yeah, with the railroad.
With the railroad and the river. I think we were assuming roughly a 30 degree skew, which is not uncommon. It just lengthens the bridge every time you have to cross something at a skew. So a little added bridge length with that skew, but again, trying to minimize impacts here. I wouldn't even mind maybe pushing this west a little bit to help out the east side, but then to get back and minimize any impacts to the Central Iowa Waterworks property is also a challenge.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks to me like for the most part, we've kind of thread the needle on those ponds, those water source ponds essentially, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll have to say I kind of like that alignment. It's lays itself in there nicely. I mean, we do end up having 3 T intersections as we try to tie in 42nd and Walnut Woods Drive and Moffett Lake Road and some of that, but not bad.
Yeah, those are things we can work through as, traffic increases and I mean that's something we could build under traffic that wouldn't take a whole lot of downtime on from a traffic standpoint. So I think it looks great.
Okay. Yeah, and some of these connections, I think this is private, so we would realign 42nd to tie in about mid-curve, still provide some decent sight distance in both directions, and then this would be a private road that just ties into 42nd stop condition. So
yep, you are right, that is a private drive.
Yep, it is.
And
just recently that became a private drive.
Oh.
And then the question is, again, we can throw this as a secondary kind of piece of the puzzle and cost estimating, but Army Post is just a 2-lane rural. Converting that to an urban 120-foot right of way, again, has some impacts. We'd have some culverts and stuff to lengthen.
It drops off quite a bit to the north side of Army Post. It's fairly flat to the south side of Army Post. So
yeah, and these are probably bare minimum horizontals at design speed.
okay.
Yeah, we may have to use some super on a couple of these curves to really tried to tighten them.
Vertically, again, maybe to help with some of those side road connections, we could steepen this up maybe and flatten across to maintain. I don't know. There's not a lot we can do, just because of all the constraints we have vertically. I think we could maybe bring this down to help with that connection at Walnut Woods Drive a little bit, but
As it stands right now, that slope coming down the hill is only 4.5%.
yeah.
That's way better than what I expected it
Yeah,
to be.
it's better than we had over at Jordan Creek.
I think the whole thing is, I was a little skeptical about could we get something fit in there, but looks to me like everything's fallen into place pretty well.
Again, that's a pretty good bridge length. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know. We're like quarter-mile bridges on both of these, I believe.
Yep.
That's what this study is about. We got to pick the alignment that makes the most sense and then put a cost to it. So
And this alignment is straight across the floodway. So if you wanted to look at extending the bridge to try to reduce any kind of hydraulic FEMA stuff later, we could extend that, but then tying into Walnut Woods Drive there would really be a challenge.
yeah, I think we need
Yeah.
to, we definitely have to get Walnut Woods Drive tied back in.
Yeah, if we want to span floodway, we're way out here. So moving on.
So I've got a hard stop at 11, actually a couple minutes before 11 if I can. So just heads up.
Okay. Now this is an extension of 35th Street. Again, trying to maintain existing alignment as far south as possible, to minimize impacts to the private properties. Getting past the Stoll residence and then bending so we can get up and over the tracks again. Utilizing this green space for our bridge embankments. Again, having to get up and over the tracks and just staying up there until essentially we touch down on the south bank of another one of Central Iowa Waterworks reservoirs. Again, a very substantial bridge, but since we're crossing the river and Walnut Woods, I mean, we could bring some fill in here and minimize impacts or minimize bridge length. But again, if we span the floodway here anyway, then as long as we don't have any sort of backwater, then we could get a no rise for this situation because we are spanning the floodway completely. So that one's probably the longest bridge out of all three of them. But
What do you envision then through the Central Iowa Waterworks pond there on the south end of the bridge? We'd have piers through that pond. We would not be filling that pond in.
Were these just rough
Yeah, I think
substructure layouts?
those were his, pure locations.
Okay.
So yeah, Ingersoll went through really high level, just kind of bridge length and span configuration to come up with, the beam depths that we wanted to use. We haven't done enough work to know if that's an optimized structure. You could always go deeper beam depths and space out your substructures, but then there's kind of that cost optimization that we can do once we settle in on the alignments and profiles. But so you can see quite a few structures dropped into the
1, 2, 3,
pond.
4, 5, yeah, possibly 6 within the
that
limits
was-
of the pond. Okay.
Yeah, I'm guessing he was looking more at spanning tracks, minimizing the number of substructures actually in the main channel and getting over Walnut Woods span. So, this was probably just kind of a secondary layout, based off of these other constraints to the north.
Okay.
And then I think he just was assuming an top of bank elevation and extending a typical 2.5 to 1 bridge slope up and setting his abutment here. The other impact also is this stream, downstream, the outlet for these reservoirs. So we came back here and just did a hard bend at Army Post, and 35th Street. So this alignment lends itself better to getting to, our logical terminus at the south, which is the interchange. We could pull this even a little farther east if we wanted to consider maybe some reconstruct and start bending this road south of Army Post to maybe get it a little farther east and minimize impacts there. But then again, you're starting to bend this farther east. This is probably as square as we're going to get with the river. Pretty close. Again, a pretty high skew with the railroad, but it is what it is in this location. So vertically, we had some challenges coming off Grand, getting up and over this hump again to minimize the grading requirements in that area with the residents and stuff. Again, doing our best to minimize embankments coming off that, but still we've got to get over the railroad. So we did set a sag there, collect that water, and then get up and over. There is the tracks there. I believe this is Walnut Woods Drive there.
Yep.
So, and this is probably the main, well, yeah. Again, this is LiDAR, so I don't know. It's not accurately representing the main channel. But we can do some hand manipulation of that ground profile once we lock in on a horizontal crossing. We can utilize the FEMA profiles to get an assumed stream bed elevation also, and kind of fake that channel in a little better.
Yeah, I think your channel is more to the left, Brad. That's the
Here?
floodway, and the floodway sits back
Oh,
quite a
okay.
bit over here.
Okay. So again, this is grade line controlled by the tracks and Walnut Woods. So hydraulically, the river's not even going to see this bridge other than some of the substructures dropped in there. But
I was looking just at the alignment right before it makes the connection into Southeast 35th Street. So we just brought some sanitary sewer through there as part of a recent project. Our alignment there pretty much hugged the property line that's just to the west of the gnarly drainage channel down in there. So between this alignment and our sanitary sewer, we'd have pretty good separation there. So it looks like it lays in there nicely in that regard.
okay.
You can almost see the clearing on your aerial there where we brought the sanitary sewer through.
Here.
Go north of Army Post.
Oh, here.
Nope.
Just north
Straight.
of the alignment, or that, not north, west of the alignment.
Right
Yep,
there.
right there.
You got it. Yep, we brought sanitary sewer north and south right through that corridor.
Okay. All right.
Yep, you got it.
Hence the riprap. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So again, horizontally, we could move this a little east if we wanted to minimize some of those impacts. And then we just kind of pulled parallel to some of these property lines, but again, these are all GIS. So plus or minus.
Okay.
Again, we've got some grade again to get up to Army Post.
Okay.
In the essence of time, then why don't we reserve the last little bit here for schedule and what our next steps are and
Looking
timeline
at,
for the next steps. Yeah.
yeah, I was just looking back at our project schedule, and the agreement. We were hoping to be at this point probably by the end of December, so, a few weeks behind on conceptual, functional design and cost estimating, and delivery of providing all the deliverables within the scope was, working on that between January and March. So,
So conceptual design is kind of our second step. You still need to make a few tweaks to this to kind of reach what you would consider the end of the conceptual design? Or do you think
um,
you're there?
I'd say this is probably about midway between. I just wanted to get these alignments and profiles roughed in so you guys can see
Yeah.
them and provide any comment. And get Eva and Bear Creek going on some of their desktop reviews. Um, but I still feel that we can tweak some of the horizontal and vertical a little bit to minimize impacts the best we can.
Okay.
So is everything you showed us today on SharePoint?
Not yet, but
Okay.
I can upload it later
Upload those
today.
and then, yeah, date them and put draft on them. So we've got those.
Okay.
Eva, when do you think you might be to a point where you've got some of your work done? What I really want to shoot towards is setting up a meeting with Tom Stoll.
Okay.
I've had several conversations with him. I've told him that we're running a little bit behind on schedule, but he was one of the first ones that we'd meet with after we get far enough along. Having the alignments to share with him, I think, would be one thing, but I think ultimately we want to make sure that we incorporate your feedback
Yep.
on some of those alignments as well. So when do you think you might be ready for that?
Well, I think now that we kind of have the main alignments pinned down, there'll be some tweaking, but I can start looking at our stuff. And so maybe like 3 weeks to a month from now. So
Okay.
mid-February.
Okay. Well, I'll at least give Tom an update there and say, hey, we can share with him these potential conceptual alignments and then maybe shoot to meet with him towards the middle of February if we can have
Yeah.
that as our next target.
Mhm.
Okay.
Do you guys want any time after I load this up to review and comment on any of this?
Yeah, I'd like to have Jim and Eric take a look at it as well from a street planning purposes. Having Ben put some eyes on it from a development perspective would be good as well. So yeah, I think as soon as we get done with this call, if you can date them, stamp them, draft, upload those, we'll start sharing those internally for additional comments as well.
Okay. And then from like a traffic, um, perspective again, there's Hidden Creek Drive, so you can see vertically where we're at. So again, making some of these connections will be a challenge. We
Yeah.
haven't looked at how far back those impacts will happen, but we'll have to start bringing some of these side roads up pretty quickly to make these connections vertically. Horizontally, they seem to work for local streets, but vertically is a different story. So
On that one, if it would be possible to bring Commerce Drive in as kind of the main drive and then have Hidden Creek Drive connected into Commerce, may be preferable, just purely because I believe Hidden Creek Drive is private, isn't it, Brian?
Yes. Hidden
Yeah.
Creek Drive is.
okay.
Commerce would be the public street, so we can not intermix the two would be ideal.
Yeah. It's going to be either highly skewed or really tight curve to get in there, but
Okay,
All right, I'm
we're
gonna
at the
have to
top of
jump
the
off
hour,
here,
so
everyone. Jason, can you, when you guys are done, can you like stop the recording and everything?
I don't know that I can because you started it, because I don't see anything on my end.
Okay. Okay.
If we're good, why don't we just call it quits on this meeting? I think we got through everything, didn't we?
I
Yeah.
think so.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.